Number 1. Define the two most common models of how society determines which acts are criminal. Consensus, where society shares a similar moral system and crimes that violate this moral system are deemed harmful and thus punishable. And conflict models, where a vastly diverse society engaged in a power struggle have codified laws based on whatever group happens to be dominant at the time. Number 2. Define crime and types of crimes. Crimes are acts that are punishable under law, as defined by the majority or powerful minority, and are considered an offense against society as a whole and prosecuted by public officials, who punish via defined sanctions such as fines, loss of liberty, or life. Some of the types or classifications of crimes are violent crimes, property crimes, crimes against public order, white-collar crime, high-tech crime, and organized crime. Number 3. Outline the 3 levels of law enforcement. First, there's local. Includes both the city and county municipal departments and offices. This is where the rubber meets the road and the majority of stereotypical police work is accomplished. Without these units, life really would become the Wild West again. Second, state. They handle the slightly larger issues and anything between or over city and county lines. State police, highway patrol, fire marshals, fish and game wardens, and the like usually fall under the state command. Finally, federal. Interstate law enforcement with jurisdiction across state lines and on any federal property outside the United States, though they often tend to overstep their already expansive bounds. Number 4. List the essential elements of the corrections system. Law enforcement, the side that carries out the laws and the will of the legislature. Court system, the ones who define the law and hand out judgment. And finally, corrections, the side that carries out the judgment handed down by the courts. Now get out of here, stalker. Number 5. Explain the difference between formal and informal criminal justice processes. Formal justice are the actions of uniformed officers that are performed by the books. Informal justice is when members of society take matters into their own hands, which gives way to things such as the lynchings of the Old West, or the demonization of a defendant before trial today, like George Zimmerman. Number 6. Describe the layers of the wedding cake model. The wedding cake model is used to describe the notoriety of a case. On the top layer, you have the so-called celebrity crimes, like Jodi Arias, Casey Anthony, and O.J. Simpson's trials. They can get dragged out for months or even years and have extensive media coverage. However, as crimes decrease in their severity, and the people who commit them in their fame, and sink to the bottom of the cake, they're pushed through the courts rather rapidly and altogether ignored by the media. Number 7. Contrast the crime control model and the due process model. The crime control model is the concept of justice that infers the right of the people to be protected from violent crime and criminals by means of prevention. It also tends to exercise expeditiousness, sacrificing the rights of a falsely accused individual for a lower perceived crime rate. Due process, on the other hand, focuses heavily on individual rights, stressing the 5th and 14th Amendments to protect the citizen from being rammed through the justice system for the sake of the so-called greater good. Number 8. List major issues facing criminal justice today. Some issues that are troubling criminal justice today are gang violence, illegal firearm usage, controlled substance abuse and trafficking, the growing prison population, government overreach, terrorism, and one that is far too often overlooked, the militarization of police forces. Number 9. List and explain the 4 written sources of American criminal law. Constitutional law, statutory law, administrative law, and case law are the 4 main pillars of American criminal justice. Constitutional law, rather obviously, is the law as it is laid out in the U.S. Constitution and various state constitutions where applicable. Statutory law is a law constructed by federal, state, and local legislators, within the confines of the Constitution, of course. Administrative law are the laws, rules, ordinances, etc. that have been handed down by the paper pushers and desk jockeys of the world, U.S. Congress and their ilk. Lastly, case law, where judges interpret higher laws to give them more accuracy, like in the case of Heller versus D.C. Number 10. Delineate the elements required to establish mens rea and actus reus. In order to establish actus reus, or the act of crime itself, it must be shown the act was voluntary, premeditated, and have criminal liability. Mens rea, on the other hand, is merely the mindset driving actus reus. It is the guilty mental state of a criminal act, or even the plotting of a criminal act. Number 11. Describe the 4 most important justification criminal defenses. Duress, justifiable use of force, necessity, and entrapment are the 4 cornerstones of criminal defense. For the first one, duress, need must be shown that the defendant was in danger, that the threat causing the danger was immediate and inescapable for states without standing ground laws, and that the defendant did not intentionally initiate it. The next offense, justified use of force, is merely the defense of your person, wards, residence, or other property to prevent or during the commission of a crime. Necessity, third on the list, is fairly straightforward. Was the use of force necessary to prevent the crime in progress? And finally, entrapment, used mostly in a case where the defendant was tricked into a certain action by the government's deceit. Number 12. List and briefly define the most important excuse defenses for crimes. Insanity, where the defendant's actions were due to a mental defect. Involuntary intoxication, again rather straightforward, albeit uncommon. And plainly, a mistake, used mostly when the law that was allegedly broken was not published at all or was published incorrectly. Number 13. Explain the differences between mala in se and mala prohibited crime. Basically, mala in se is an act considered wrong or unjust regardless of whether or not there are laws in the books against it, like murder, rape, or incest. Mala prohibita, however, is the moral gray area, where something is a crime strictly because of the laws on the books. Think marijuana use, for example. These mala prohibited laws generally reflect cultural taboos and morality. Number 14. Explain the precedence and the importance of stare decisis. Stare decisis is a doctrine of common law that states, more or less, that judges are professionally obligated to hand out judgments and rulings based off the precedents of prior decisions. Number 15. In general, what are the elements of a crime? A crime is generally composed of 1. A guilty act, coupled with 2. Guilty intent, 3. Concurrence, or the guilty act and guilty mind working in tandem, 4. A link between the crime and the law broken, and 5. Any attendant circumstances, and lastly, number 6. The harmful result of the act. Number 16. In the classification scheme used by most states today, what is the distinction between felonies and misdemeanors? Basically, if a crime is serious enough to be punishable by a longer period of time, it's a felony, whereas crimes that are punishable by shorter periods of time or by fines are misdemeanors.